What are you doing to me? Finally reading. I followed the R.L. Stine to Stephen King pipeline as a kid. You know, I read Goosebumps as like a little kid, and then Fear Street, and then after Fear Street came Stephen King. And for whatever reason, I have not read it. I actually have 2 copies of this now, and I feel like I had another copy, like one of his other soft cover paperback copies. I have a compulsion if I see a Stephen King novel for sale. I don't care if I have 30 copies of his books, I have to buy it. There are some books of his that I have 3 or 4 copies of them. Like I have The Dark Half. So this is also, side note, this is one of my favorite Stephen King novels that I feel doesn't get enough attention. I feel like we hear about it, we hear about Pet Sematary, Could Carry, the Dark Tower series, but some of my favorite Stephen King novels are some of his lesser talked about ones, like The Dark Half. I have 3 copies, and so these 2 I'm going to put in the little free library that I'm building in front of my house. One of my favorite things a novel can do is like change the way you think about something. And in Stephen King's book Dreamcatcher, there's a part where he's describing going into like the mind of a character, and he describes it like this old library where, sorry, the cat is trying to climb. So it's described as this old library that's kind of dark and dingy and has lots of unfiled file boxes. You know, in those are different memories and pieces of information that you have stored in your brain. When I read this, like, oh my god, that's a brilliant visual. I'm a very visual person, and so I took that and I was like, I'm going to use this in my brain forever and ever. And so now when I think about my own memories, there's like a split second where if I'm trying to think about something, I will imagine myself in my mind's labyrinth of a library trying to find a piece of paper with a specific something on it. That's also kind of the fault in how I study and remember things, is I will read something and I could tell you what page it's on, where the line is in the book, but not tell you like what it says. So my recall is faulty. It's there, it's just got some dust on it. So Stephen King, my first Stephen King book was Cujo. And I remember I read that as a preteen, and my aunt had a dog named Cujo. Not a Saint Bernard. Cujo was, I think she was a collie mix. She was super sweet. I remember being in my grandpa's house and taking her and the other dog, Bonnie, outside in the backyard to brush them. And we thought it was so cool because with Cujo specifically, she had the kind of fur where you could like just pluck little tufts. So I have a lot of Stephen King books in my collection that I have not read yet. And it's been a minute since I actually read a Stephen King novel. I want to say that my last Stephen King novel that I read might actually have been Dark Tower series. And I think I kind of got burnt out after reading that series, which was crazy because it was good. Obviously, it was, you know, he said it himself, it was his, like, Lord of the Rings, his epic tale. But it was a lot. That took me actually a couple years because there was like 2 years where I put down Wizard and Glass and didn't pick it back up again until a couple years later. Also, hot take, I understand that Stephen King is categorized as a horror author, but I feel from the books that I've read of his, yes, there is obviously the horror element, but I feel like he actually gravitates more towards sci-fi, especially in novels like The Dreamcatcher or Under the Dome or his Dark Tower series and so many other ones. And maybe it's just the books that I've read of his have primarily been those with kind of like a more sci-fi feel to them. I mean, there is obviously an element of overlap between horror and sci-fi because a lot of sci-fi can be made scary. Yeah, it's just something I've always thought about, that I think I would classify Stephen King more as like a sci-fi writer, which is great because I really enjoy sci-fi. So he's one of my favorites, whether it's horror or sci-fi. Anyways, so I'm I'm going to be reading it. Fair warning, I'm what I consider to be a slow reader. I follow a lot of book talk girlies and watch other book vlogs where maybe a younger crowd or people who doing this is their full-time job, they can carve out very large chunks of time for reading. I don't necessarily have that luxury, and I don't consume audiobooks as easily. I've tried all the different hacks, speeding it up, slowing it down, and audiobooks just have not been the best fit for me. The last audiobook I read was actually Dracula in 2020, and I had the audiobook playing while I was reading along in the book. So that is the only way that I can really listen to an audiobook, is if it's in tandem with an actual reading the words in front of my face. And I also enjoy closed captioning on my TV, so maybe it's connected. It's November, what is today? November 13th? I think today's November 13th. So it's November 13th. I actually was going to start reading this in October, and then I put it off because I was reading Britney Spears' memoir and Patrick Stewart's memoir, Team Britney. A lot of times I will be reading 2, 3, 4, 6 different books at a time, because depending on my mood or where I'm at in a certain book, I'll want to put it down and pick something else up. I think I'm currently reading like 3 or 4 books right now of various genres. But because of this vlog, I am going to pause the other books I'm reading and focus just on this book. I am actually curious to know how long it's going to take me. This thing is huge. Let's see. It's 1,153 pages long. And it says this book was begun in Bangor, Maine on September 9th, 1981 and completed in Bangor, Maine on December 28th, 1985. So it took him 4 years to write this book, and it's only taken me like 20 years to get around to reading it. This is the longest intro ever. I just finished the first chapter. What the fuck? Okay, so I just finished chapter 2. I have really been left in the dark about this whole book. The only thing I knew about it were things I have seen on social media and the media in general. So Pennywise and Georgie. I don't know if that comes back into play later on. I was not expecting chapter 1 to just like come out of the gate swinging. But now I see more a pattern of what the style of the story is being told in. Like, here's this encounter, and here's this encounter, and here's this encounter that's connected to this encounter. It's gonna be interesting. I don't know if it loops back to Georgie or if we just collectively as a society took that little nugget and ran with it because it's horrifying. But even chapter 2 is horrifying. Not even because of the clown, but because of society and how ugly people were in the 80s. And now, I'm gonna go back to reading. Okay, wait. The turtle. Does the turtle have significance? Is this a thing with Stephen King? Has anybody read the Dark Tower series? The turtle? The turtle? The turtle couldn't help us? Oh my god. My brain. Stephen King, what are you doing to me? Good morning. I couldn't sleep last night, and so I read until like 2 a.m. and I finished part 1, and I was having like a reading deja vu. I was like, I know I haven't read this book, but this seems really familiar. And first of all, naming one of the main characters, Eddie, was reminiscent of and so the first 2 chapters of the book obviously were very jarring. But then after that, it goes on to, give the backstory of what I'm assuming are the main characters of the book. And it has a very similar feel to the Dark Tower series and the Gunslingers and their psychic connection, the quartet, I think it's what it's called. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. So, yeah, I just wanted to pop on here and say that. Oh, and I went to the dentist yesterday, and the woman in reception was like, that book is so scary. And I wish I had the courage to film in public, because it was a really cute conversation. That would have been interesting to have here, but I didn't. But she said it was really scary, and I don't know. We'll see. Say good morning, Astrid. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Astrid. My kids are on break. I don't have school. I don't have work. So I think today I'm going to be a blob and see how much of this I can get read. Because it's now November 21st. And I'm this far. I want to finish this book and finish this vlog before my next big bedtime story reading. So I think during Thanksgiving break, I'm going to try to get as much read as possible. We'll see. So earlier I talked about how Stephen King is a sci-fi writer, and I was wondering, what is it that classifies something as horror versus just like sci-fi thriller? And then I got to this part of it. Is it the gore? Is it gore that makes horror? Because I don't feel like I've read much horror or even seen many horror films, really, because I don't have an affinity for gore. If I'm reading something or watching a film, I want you to wreck me emotionally. I want you to psychologically scar me. I don't want to be grossed out by gore. I think gore is cheap. It feels cheap to me. But this passage right here, this is more than just a quick mention of somebody dying or being assaulted. This is, then the trachean hands closed around his neck, and Eddie's hoarse cries were choked off as the creature turned him over. The chitinous hooks which sprouted from those hands scrawled bleeding marks like calligraphy into his neck. He stared into its glowing white eyes. He felt the webs between its fingers, pressing against his throat the constricting bands of living seaweed. His terror-sharpened gaze noted the fin, something like a rooster's comb and something like a hornpout's poisonous back fin, standing atop the creature's hunched and plaited head. As its hands clamped tight, shutting off his air, he was even able to see the way the white light from the arc sodium lamp turned a smoky green as it passed through that membranous head fin. "You're not real," Eddie choked. But clouds of grayness were closing in now, and he realized faintly that it was real enough, this creature. It was, after all, killing him. And yet some rationality remained, even until the end, as the creature hooked its claws into the soft meat of his neck, as his carotid artery let go in a warm and painless gout that splashed the thing's reptilian plating. Eddie's hands groped at the creature's back, feeling for a zipper. They fell away only when the creature tore his head from his shoulders with a low, satisfied grunt. And as Eddie's picture of what it was began to fade, it began promptly to change into something else. Ugh. I haven't read any of Stephen King's writings that have been like that. At least not that I remember. Oh, that looks like a little heart. Woof. Okay. Let's get back to it.
Found another one. It was one of those perfect summer days, which, in a world where everything was on track and on the beam, you would never forget. The Beam, The Dark Tower. He wrote the Dark Tower series in 82, and he wrote it in 86. See? I knew it. I knew in the beginning there was a common thread. There was a common vibe. I feel like he's kind of pulling from the world of the Dark Tower series into it. And perhaps into other writings. Maybe he just commingles it into other stuff too. I love when this happens. It's interesting when it happens between books that aren't even related. Like, I picked up Britney Spears' memoir and Sir Patrick Stewart's memoir, and it was like a couple pages into Britney Spears' memoir, and there was the phrase, make it so. And I was like, shut up, I just bought Sir Patrick Stewart's memoir, and then I start reading Britney's first, and Britney Spears, of all people, is going to have Captain Jean-Luc Picard's famous one-liner in her memoir, like, the universe. Okay, I'm getting back to reading. I was just reading between clients and I had to stop because I started crying.
It's like in the fucking tower. There are so many parallels. Why? Why are there so many parallels? Oh, what the fuck? You know what else? It's also, I think this is the climax, and it's making me think of a scene from The Hobbit, which is interesting because Stephen King talks about how his Dark Tower series is his, like, Lord of the Rings, and so okay. So I had to leave right at the climax to go spend some time with some friends for my friend's birthday. And it's 1:19 in the morning. And so I was out with my friends and all I could talk about was this fucking book. And so I'm out and I love this friend dearly, so I wasn't gonna, like, bail on her. But yeah, I was like, I wanna go home. I wanna go home. I wanna read my book. So I came home and I took a bath because I take a bath every night so I can wash my face. And now I'm in bed and I haven't eaten anything today because they got, like, pizza and I wasn't gonna have the pizza. I just DoorDashed some Taco Bell. And I plan on staying up eating my Taco Bell until I finish this book. I think it's less than 200 pages. So, yeah, we're about to hit the climax. So my Taco Bell should be here in, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. And I will check back in if something happens. Or if I finish it. If I finish it, oh my gosh. I feel I'm trying really hard not to skip over some of the more tedious spots. You know how like when you know it's coming, so you're like, let me just skip to it and gloss over this unnecessary information. I'm trying really hard not to do that. I'm trying to like read all of it. Okay, I'm gonna read. Bye. I finished it. It's 3:22 in the morning. I have so many thoughts. I have so many thoughts. But I'm gonna go to bed. Good night. So it's the next morning. I literally just woke up. I think the worst part for me, I hate that this happened. I kind of got the ick for Stephen King for what he did with chapter 22, part 12. It makes me uncomfortable just thinking about it, and not uncomfortable in like a good, I'm having a hard time articulating how I feel about this. So throughout the book, it's peppered with what I'm assuming is a historically accurate representation of violent racism, violent homophobia, violent anti-Semitism, and fat phobia, like all of it. Okay, it's all in here. It's raw, it's gross, it makes you uncomfortable, but it makes you uncomfortable because that's the reality. That's humans, right? And that's fine, because that is a discomfort we can reflect on and grow from, and you feel uncomfortable because you feel ashamed, right? And that's good. Lean into that. Never let it happen again, kind of thing, right? But what he did, and I don't want to give spoilers, get the whole book if you want, and or I don't know, we'll talk about it in the comments or something. Chapter 22, part 12 is going to be etched into my memory forever, and it was not okay. Not only was it not okay what he had the characters do, it was completely unnecessary, completely gratuitous. It did not advance the plot. It did not deepen the relationship between the characters in a way that could not have happened with something else. It made me sick to my stomach. It kind of put like a shit on the whole rest of everything else. Like, it really kind of invalidated all of the character bonding previous to that. For me, at least. It was that repulsive. It was bad. Stephen King, Mr. King, why did you do that? Why would you do that? It's so frustrating. Fuck. Okay, but aside from that, it was really bad, you guys. I don't know, and I might just be sensitive to it because of my personal trauma, and I'm willing to acknowledge that, but it doesn't change the fact it was unnecessary. They're 11 years old. Like, don't do that. They're not even teenagers. They're fifth graders. Fifth graders. Okay, I digress. So other than that, I have been talking about this book to anybody and everybody who would listen, and what I came to find was that not very many people had read the book, but they had seen the movies. I was also surprised at how excited I got when somebody else had read it, or even, I mean, okay, seeing the movie, okay, that's still, you have some input. I haven't seen the movies yet. I'm gonna do that maybe today, which one of my clients that I talked to about this said not to waste my time with the original Tim Curry version, but that kind of feels, I'm like blocking my face with this. I don't want you seeing my face. Here we go, back to the original Jaclyn, who blocks her face for the camera because it's early morning and I don't know why I film as soon as I wake up, because I'm puffy and gross, and I burp. So my client told me not to waste my time watching the Tim Curry version of the movie. But to me, that almost feels like sacrilegious. Like it's Tim Curry. It's Tim Curry. I have to watch it. So maybe I'll just watch both and then I'll report back. I forgot how much I like to talk about books and nerdy shit with people. One of my high school buddies who used to come over to my house after school, he was friends with my older sister and my brother-in-law and me by default because I lived here. And he would come over to our house after school and we would watch The X-Files on DVD. I was so happy sitting there talking to these old friends about like Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and like sci-fi nerdy shit, because I realized that I don't have that many people in my current circle who are into that kind of stuff. So for me, I don't get to like talk about. Sometimes I forget just how fucking nerdy I am until I'm with my people. And then it all comes out and I'm like, girl, you like fucking played World of Warcraft. And you and I'm like a nerd who like aspires to be more nerdy. Like I want to learn more. I want to watch more of the things and get deeper down the rabbit hole. So if you are also like a quiet nerd who enjoys things like sci-fi. Oh, and it started because I was talking about how I wanted to go home and read my book, and then we started talking about Stephen King and how I think he writes more sci-fi fantasy leaning, which is my favorite genre, if I'm being honest, other than like classics. And so that started the whole conversation about what classifies as sci-fi versus horror, and are there subcategories for like paranormal and supernatural and like the beep beep boop boop kind of sci-fi versus like aliens and shit. And all of that came from this book, kind of. So back to the book. It was so interesting to me throughout the interweaving of like his Tower series. It read very much like kept imagining the characters as the characters loosely in Stranger Things. Like right down to like the token black kid and the token redhead girl that's like one of the guys, but not really. It was good. Honestly, I can't get over the ick. I wish he hadn't done that. Even the ending was kind of similar to the Dark Tower series, if I'm remembering correctly, which is possible that I'm not, because sometimes I read a book and I have no idea. Couldn't tell you a thing about it. I don't know. I have really mixed feelings right now. I feel like it's very fresh. I feel like I'm realizing a lot of things about myself as a reader from reading this. I think I mentioned it in a clip, which I may or may not have edited into here. I am finding more and more that maybe I'm not really a horror fan, and I need to look up the actual definition of that genre, both in movies and in books, because I like being scared, right? Like I get it, but the gratuitous like gore and like slasher style descriptions, like it's not, again, it's not necessary. It doesn't further the plot. Like I get it, it's gruesome. You don't have to be quite so descriptive about it. Maybe it's just because I am really sensitive and I have a really good imagination, so it doesn't take much to get me there. I can fill in all the blanks without all eyeballs popping out of your head with like fucking pus dripping down your cheek. Like I get it. I get it. And I'm no stranger to gore. Like I'm a mom of 3 children and I have seen my fair share of scraped knees and, you know, babies being born, midwifery training with like suturing, and seeing the destruction of all of that, and cesarean sections. Like I get it. And it's not even like a queasy thing. It's just like, it's like I shudder, and I don't enjoy that part of it as much as I enjoy like the thriller part of it, the psychological, anticipatory horror, right? Let me know what you think, because I'm very curious about horror versus like sci-fi and fantasy thriller. Like, where's the line? What constitutes one over the other? I also don't know what book I'm gonna read next, because I wanna read another Stephen King book, and I wanna find other Stephen King nerds to join me in my conversations in the comments. Come on, come on, come talk about weird shit with me. Okay, that's it. I love you, bye.